A barking dog cut through the noise cancellation in Manny's earbuds. It sounded far away, masked behind the blended acoustic and overdriven guitars of Black Balloon by the Goo Goo Dolls. He glanced up as he jammed his trowel underneath the 14th rock he'd found in his new would-be garden. A prematurely white-haired man was walking his black lab up the sidewalk. Manny saw him wave and gave a quick, friendly nod back before returning to his task. He heard the man say something. "Sorry?" He took off a glove to pause his song before twisting his upper half around. The man had stopped as close as he could without allowing the dog to nip at Manny's muddy shoes. The man smiled. He had to shout over the barking. "No, I'm sorry. Donner's usually better behaved than this." "Oh, it's all right," yelled Manny, turning quarter of the way back. "I'm Ted," the man bellowed. "Manny." Manny then dismissed him with a smile. "I live just up the road," yelled Ted. "You all moved in already?" "Getting there," grunted Manny, jamming his trowel again. "Well, it's still early. You met whoever's moving in next door?" asked Ted. Manny wiped sweat from his eyes, smearing dirt across his forehead as he sat back on his knees. He could feel the heat of Donner's barks on his arm. Ted wasn't as young as he'd looked from a distance after all. He was in spectacular shape, though. He must have been at least 60, but his round shoulders still bulged under his blue t-shirt. "Didn't know somebody was moving in," Manny shouted back. Ted yelled, "Oh yeah, both sides went up for rent at the same time." "Cool." The words sounded even less enthusiastic at high volume. Manny gave a stiff wave with his ungloved hand and said, "Nice meeting you." Ted whipped Donner's leash like reins. "You too." After dislodging the 18th rock, Manny sighed and rolled onto his rear. He glanced up the road and quickly averted his eyes. White hair and round delts were headed toward him. Manny pretended to brush hair away from his ear as he paused his music again in preparation for what felt like an inevitable conversation. "Hey, Manny." "Please, no more shouting," Manny internally pleaded. "No barking dog this time," Ted laughed, not remotely breathless after his power walk down the sidewalk. "Sorry I bothered him so much," Manny said. He didn't like Ted towering over him, so he stood even though it might be misconstrued as willingness to chat. That's actually why I came back," said Ted. "I know we just met, and this is going to sound a little strange, but hear me out." "No, seriously, it's okay," said Manny. "Labs are smart. He probably just remembers whoever lived here before me and doesn't think I belong here." "I wish that was all it was," Ted sighed. "Look, Manny, there's no easy way to tell you this, but I'm worried you've got some bad energy attached to you." Manny almost laughed. "Bad energy? Oh, if I seemed rude earlier, it was just hard to talk over the barking, I know," said Ted. "Donner has an incredible sixth sense for this sort of thing, and I trained him to bark at dark, bad, or unclean spirits. Energies, rather. I hate calling them spirits. Still slips out every once in a while. Makes people think I'm a kook." He winked. "Yeah, I bet," said Manny. "So anyway, I wanted to invite you. Once a month, a small group of my friends gets together at my place to clean out our energies. It's, well, maybe about as strange as it sounds, but I think it'd be worth a shot for you. We're doing our next cleansing on Friday. Just, pay attention over the next few days. If you're feeling easily frustrated or stressed or depressed, that might be coming from an energy we can rid you of." "Okay, sure. Sure, I'll pay attention. But I think I might have plans on Friday." "Handsome young guy like you, I sure hope so," Ted laughed. "Us old folks get together at 7, and it usually doesn't take more than an hour. I'm sure you'll have plenty of time for your, girlfriend?" "Not at the moment," Manny replied. Ted nudged one of his big shoulders toward Manny. "Still playing the field, huh?" "Just the garden at the moment," Manny replied. He delivered the joke so blandly it took Ted a moment to catch it. When he did, he laughed. Well, you've got a sense of humor. I suppose you're generally a pretty positive person, huh? Usually, said Manny. I hope you can stay that way, living in a place like this. Ted looked toward the roof of Manny's duplex, scanning as if searching for something perched up there. Despite his desire to end the conversation, Manny couldn't help but ask, a place like this duplex? Did they have to tell you what happened here? Asked Ted. Before you signed the lease, was there any kind of disclosure? Something about how there might be lead paint, but that's all. I checked, there isn't any. Guess they're not legally required to tell you since it happened in the other unit. Well, now I'm sorry I brought it up. Manny waited patiently for Ted to elaborate, but he seemed to want to make Manny pry. He gave in. So what happened? Ted met his eyes for a moment, then looked at the empty unit attached to Manny's. He nodded toward it. The guy who lived in that one got murdered about a month ago now. His name was Enzo, and they think Andrew, the guy who lived in your half, did it. Inside the duplex? Asked Manny. Yep. Not your half, that one. He nodded toward the adjacent unit again. He made a downward stabbing motion 3 times before running his invisible blade across his own throat, finishing with a crazed smile. Nasty scene, I heard. Andrew up and vanished the same night. Could he have been kidnapped or something? Asked Manny. Police won't say much. You know how they withhold certain information. But I heard they found Andrew's fingerprints all over the knife that killed Enzo. Ted turned unexpectedly and raised a hand in farewell. He said, Anyway, I'll watch for you Friday. If not, no worries, but you might want to consider it. Some of that energy you're carrying might be coming from, He trailed off, giving one last nod toward the duplex. Manny waved back. Yeah, thanks. Have a good one. It felt like a stupid way to close the conversation. Manny was just glad for it to be over. He hid his trowel and gloves under a bush and went inside to wash up and make a stiff drink. He downed it quickly, feeling the rum warm his empty stomach. It numbed his thoughts in the nick of time. If Ted had been telling the truth about Donner's ability to sense depression, the dog had been spot on. 2 days later, Manny came home from work to see Ted talking to a woman in the driveway of the unit next door. He looked more animated than he had been when Manny met him. Probably, thought Manny, because the 30-ish-year-old woman was pretty cute. Donner sat obediently at Ted's side. As Manny opened his car door and stepped onto his own driveway, he heard Ted say, I can't imagine the weight of the energy here. Your attitude about it is impressive, but still, just think about what I said. He heard the woman ask, Would you need to cleanse the house to get rid of the energy? No, Ted replied, lowering his voice almost to where Manny couldn't hear. If we clean your energy, make it good and pure, yours will push the old one out. These forces stick to their twins, but they're repelled by their opposites. That's so interesting, said the woman. Manny saw her glance his way and gave her a nod. It was time to see if he could repel Ted's energy. Ted, how's it going? He asked as he approached. Ted turned, almost startled. Donner was already staring Manny down, although he seemed far calmer than the last time they'd met. Manny offered his hand for the Labrador to sniff and said, Hey, Donner. The dog buried his snout in his palm before snorting his approval. Whoa, you snuck up on me there. Hey, this is Tessa, right? Tessa, said the woman, sticking her hand forward. Manny looked down at his own hand, which felt misty with dog breath, and waved it apologetically. Tessa laughed. He asked, You moving in? Tomorrow, yeah, said Tessa. My brother's hauling all my stuff up from Missouri. I came ahead of time to make sure it's, clean and ready. Manny said, Sure. Judging by the shade that suddenly shadowed her tone, he guessed she knew about what had happened in her new home. Ted patted him on the shoulder and gave a subtle squeeze. His meaning became clear when he flashed Manny a wink before saying, "I'll let you two get to know each other. Tessa, we're getting started at 7 on Friday. I'll watch for you. If not, no worries." Thanks, said Tessa, passively waving. "He said the exact same thing to me," Manny told her when Ted was far enough away. "He invite you to his seance thing?" "Seance? Oh man, I wish," Tessa laughed. "He just invited me to some hippie cleansing ritual. A seance sounds way better." Manny said, "I honestly don't know the difference. Not really my kind of thing." "Sounds like you could learn all about it on Friday night." Manny snorted. "You know what's funny? Last time that dog saw me, he went nuts. Ted told me it's because he sensed all this bad energy around me, but he seemed totally fine just now." "Did you shower in holy water?" Tessa teased. "Not unless it's in the tap," Manny laughed. Looking toward Donner, Tessa said, "He didn't seem to mind me." "But let me guess. According to Ted, you're still surrounded by negative energy, yep." "Ah, what a shame." "Totally." Manny laughed, breaking the act. He said, "I might not have signed the lease if they told me about that guy." Tessa said, "Yeah, well, I'm sure you can imagine it would have taken a lot to get me to pass up a place this cheap. Sorry, I'm guessing you know about what happened here?" "Yeah," Ted told me. "I just moved in too. I'd offer to swap, but I don't think I'd want to live on your side either, to be honest." "I thought you didn't believe in that stuff," Tessa teased. "No," I said, "it's not my kind of thing. It still freaks me out." "Fair enough," said Tessa. "I'm not gonna lie, he told me your name, but I forgot what it was." "Manny. And I think my hand's dry now." They smiled at each other and shook hands. "Manny?" Tessa asked, a laugh hidden behind her voice. "Yeah, is that okay?" "Oh my god, I'm so sorry. I've just never met anybody." "Oh, this is your first time? That makes a lot of sense." "Anybody named Manny before." "It's cute though, like the mammoth from Ice Age. Yeah. A big hairy beast with the voice of Ray Romano, every girl's dream." "At least you're not Sid the Sloth." "Hey, there's a bright side to everything." "So what's it like inside?" Tessa looked at her front door. "I haven't gone in yet. Ted caught me right when I pulled up. You want to check it out with me?" "Oh, sure." "You seem nervous." "I'm not." "You're not going to murder me, are you?" "No, that was the last guy." Tessa accidentally shot spittle through her pursed lips. Manny cowered back and said, "You're getting your negative energy all over me." "I am so sorry," Tessa wheezed. Manny smiled assuringly. "All good. So should we check this place out?" Tessa's unit was a mirror image of Manny's. Once he figured that out, he took over the tour. "Dang, I think your kitchen is nicer than mine. Newer counters. So what brings you up from Missouri, you said?" Tessa ran her fingers along the smooth, cold countertop, but she was more distracted by the lingering odors of bleach and ammonia in the air. She said, "Missouri, yeah. Nothing exciting, just work." "What do you do?" asked Manny. Tessa scanned the kitchen. She realized the vinyl sheet flooring didn't match the laminate throughout the rest of the home. She took a step back through the doorway into the empty living room. "Do you think this is where it happened?" She pointed back into the kitchen. Manny said, "Huh?" and looked down at his feet. A chill came over him. He'd been too distracted by Tessa and how well their interaction was going to think about the murder. Could be, I guess. They didn't tell you?" "Just that it happened inside," Tessa said. "Anyway, sorry, I'm a GM at Homemakers. The one at the store here quit and they asked if I'd move up to take over. I needed a change of scenery anyway." "Oh yeah?" Manny asked. He could see how much the kitchen bothered her and led her away to the back hallway. "Sorry," Tessa said, forcing a laugh. "That made it sound like I'm running from some wild past. I was just kind of bored, really. Ready for something different." "Well, you found different," said Manny, showing her into the empty master bedroom. The chemical aroma was less powerful back there. Tessa seemed to find some comfort in the light blue room and leaned against one of the walls. "I think I'll get over it," she said. You know." I know. I thought it wouldn't bug me at all. I hope once I get all my stuff moved in, you'll adjust, said Manny. And if you ever need to get out. He stopped himself, feeling gross about taking advantage of Tessa's discomfort to be so forward. She gave him an understanding smile and said, Thanks. How about Friday? Manny grinned. Oh, please give me any excuse. Tessa's smile turned mischievous. No, I was thinking we could actually go to Ted's. Manny searched for any hint of sarcasm. He found a little irony in her eyes, but nothing more. She said, I'm serious. Man, this place really is getting to you, he replied. No, I just think it could make a funny story. Imagine the characters who hang out with that guy. You're actually being serious? He asked. 100%. But I'm only going if you go too. We gotta stick together. Manny liked the sound of that. Okay, he said. Sure, I'll go for the story. Really? Tessa asked. He wondered if she'd secretly hoped he would shut her down. He got the feeling she let her impulses drive much of the time. There's plenty of time to change your mind, he offered. Yeah, there is. Okay, if I change my mind, Can I get your number? Manny couldn't have been happier to give it to her. Tessa did not change her mind, and at 6:57 Friday night, they met in Manny's driveway to walk down to Ted's. Do you know what house it is? Tessa asked. Oh, shoot, said Manny. I never saw what house he went to. Me either. He didn't give me the address. Is this a bust already? Tessa stared up the street. She tilted her head and narrowed her eyes. There's some cars parked up there. Maybe it'll be obvious which house it is. He did say he'd watch for us, said Manny. Thanks again for helping me move in, said Tessa as they started to walk. Sure. How's the place feeling now? Tessa stayed quiet for a few seconds before answering. Better. I still feel weird in the kitchen, but the smell's starting to go away. I left the windows open for the last 2 days. Smart, said Manny. They took a few more steps in silence. Finally, he said, So, oh hey, Tessa simultaneously said. Sorry, you first. No, I actually didn't know what I was going to say, honestly. Oh, well, I did. Okay, then you go ahead. Tessa flicked her hair back. I will, thanks. You asked why I moved, but I never asked you. That's right, said Manny. So why'd you move? Ah, there it is. His mouth shaped around a word he chose not to project. He closed it without saying anything. After a few silent steps, Tessa asked, Know how I apologize a lot? Guess I hadn't noticed, said Manny. Well, it's something I do. Just like intrinsically. The same thing in my brain is making me talk right now because I can tell you're uncomfortable. That's handy, said Manny. Tessa pouted. Hey, I'm being vulnerable. And now I know your weakness. Not fair. Now you have to tell me yours. Manny said nothing and kept saying nothing. Tessa scolded him. Manny, stop it. He kept his mouth shut. All I did was ask you a question, just a simple little question. I'm sorry if that didn't take long, Manny interrupted. You suck. No, I use humor to cope. See, I can be vulnerable too. Oh yes, you're quite the comedian. It was a breakup. Tessa stopped walking. Manny turned to face her. He shrugged. It's all right. Happens to everybody, right? It's worse at this age though, isn't it? Asked Tessa. You too, huh? Know how I said I moved because I was bored? More like I was trapped. He was, well, not him, but people he knew, places we went, that sort of stuff was everywhere. I couldn't get away from him without leaving everything. And she flapped her arms defeatedly. Here I am. Her head jerked up. Hey, you just deflected to me, didn't you? Manny started to laugh, but Ted's voice stopped him short. Manny, Tessa, come on in. They scanned every porch but couldn't find Ted anywhere. Manny hoped they never would. He was having a nice time and frankly forgot where they were heading until then. Right here, window, Ted called. Finally, they found him, leaning under half-closed blinds to shout through a window screen on a brown ranch house. He ducked back and the blinds closed. A moment later, the front door opened. Ted leaned out and waved. "I'm so glad you both came." "Yeah," Manny replied. "Wouldn't miss it," said Tessa. Ted stepped fully onto his front step. "Oh, come on, guys. I know how weird it sounds. No need to pretend it doesn't. But it is real, that I'll promise you." Manny eyed the gorgeous cars lining the street outside of Ted's house. A BMW, an Audi, and 2 Maseratis. And there was a Porsche parked in the driveway. He was glad he didn't have to park his Hyundai Elantra amongst these beauties. "What is it exactly?" asked Tessa. Ted pointed a finger like testing the wind and said, "Fair to ask, but I cannot answer. I would if I could, promise. It's just one of those things you have to experience for yourself. But hey, everybody's here now. We waited a couple minutes in case you were coming." "Oh, sorry to make you wait," said Tessa. "Very sorry," Manny echoed, giving Tessa the slightest nudge with his elbow. No, said Ted. "It's all happening as it's meant to." With that, he led them to his front door, then through. They stepped onto tile that felt cold through their shoes somehow. "Don't worry about Donner," he told Manny specifically. "He stays locked up for these. Not that he would cause a problem, but we lean towards safety. You can leave your shoes here. Just against the wall's fine." Manny's and Tessa's shoes were the only pairs left by the wall, even though Ted claimed others had come. Manny wondered if, perhaps, Ted thought the other guests' shoes were cleaner. Tessa seemed to hesitate, fingers lingering on her sandals. Ted, who seemed more observant by the minute, stepped around Manny to open the closet and show them a row of variously sized shoes inside it. He said, "Closet's all full." Tessa began to say, "Sorry," but Ted said, "I completely understand your misgivings. I'm just glad you're willing to give us a shot. Last thing is, I assume you both have phones?" "Of course," said Manny. Ted picked up an empty basket on a stool next to the door. He turned toward them and said, "You can leave them here. The signals mess with our energies, so we keep them out of the room." Manny asked, "Could we just turn them off?" "No, sorry," said Ted. "They're never really off. Don't you know that? But don't worry, they'll be right here, and if you need to use them, you can come in here and do so at any time." "Where's everyone else's phones?" asked Tessa, since they seemed to have been given full permission to be suspicious. Ted laughed. "We've all been doing this for a while. They leave them at home or in their cars maybe. I can't say I've ever asked. I just know they don't bring them." "They'll stay here?" asked Manny, holding his phone over the basket. "On my honor," said Ted. Manny took his phone out and placed it in the basket. Tessa did the same. Ted thanked them and placed the basket back on the stool next to the door. "Now." Tessa hadn't even noticed she'd been next to a pocket door until Ted reached around her and slid it open. The next room was lit only by candlelight. 5 candles formed a line down the middle of an oval table around which 4 people of similar age to Ted sat in black hoodies. Crystal and stone jewelry adorned the necks, wrists, and earlobes of every man and woman. "Everyone," began Ted, rolling a stone bracelet onto his own wrist. "This is Manny and Tessa. They moved into the duplex down the street. The one, I don't probably need to say, do I? The empty one. Manny and Tessa, this is Erica." He pointed to a woman who reminded Manny of a teacher with flushed red cheeks. "Rich." He pointed to a man who likely hunted year-round by Manny's estimation. "Gerald." Tessa thought the man he pointed at next would have an easier time eating off his own belly than the table, if eating had actually been what they'd gathered to do, that was. "And Sandra." Both Manny and Tessa felt relieved at the excuse to look at the woman sitting closest to them. They'd both taken quick glances at her before and been met with the most expectant stares either of them had ever received. Sandra, was no younger than anyone else seated around the table, but she'd done her makeup like a 19-year-old TikToker. Tessa was impressed. Manny was too oblivious to feel the same, but despite the skill Sandra displayed in how she applied the makeup, it gave her a cold, uncanny look. No, wait, that's Botox, Tessa realized. Sandra's face was frozen in a semi-permanent smile. Now that that's done, Ted clapped, I'll get the tea. Should we sit? Asked Manny. Oh, where are my manners, of course. Please have a seat. Do you take sugar with your tea, either of you? Honey, maybe? I'm okay, actually, Tessa said. None for me either, said Manny. The tea's part of the ceremony. Everyone drinks. Rich half growled through his thick red mustache. Unfortunately, he's right, said Ted. The tea is a pretty important part of the ceremony, so sugar or honey? It's not bad straight, said Erica. It sounded like she had a speech impediment or perhaps was a little drunk. Whatever you think tastes best, Tessa said. Manny felt a tension pulling him toward her, like she'd suddenly gained gravity. Same, he said. Giving a double thumbs up, Ted declared, Sugar it is, and left through another pocket door. Manny pulled out a chair, then offered it to Tessa. She pretended to faint at his chivalry, then quickly remembered they had an audience. She rushed to ask, How did you all meet? You could say we were brought together, Gerald said with cringeworthy gravitas. Yeah, basically, mumbled Erica. Ted sort of collects people, said Rich, like he did with you two. He brings people together, Sandra clarified. Tautness at the edges of her face told them she was trying to smile. Her face looked like a mask glued to her skin. You all live around here too? Manny asked. Not in the neighborhood, but close enough, said Rich. And I frankly can't remember how we met. One of those chance encounters, you know. He probably stopped me at the grocery store and chatted my ear off till I agreed to come here. It was years ago, I can't remember. Sandra made a choking sound they couldn't ignore. Her eyes were the only part of her face that moved. She tipped her head back slightly, swallowed, and said as if nothing happened, He stopped me at the clinic. He said he could feel a heavy burden attached to me and asked if I wanted to be free from it. She laughed through frozen lips. Out of everyone here, I probably believed him the easiest. She jangled her bracelets and flicked her earlobes and laughed. These aren't my first crystals. She leaned toward Manny, either to whisper to him or take a bite out of his cheek. Thankfully, it was the former. Everyone else adapted after they learned how powerful this really is. Here we go, cheered Ted, entering with a tray on which he had centered a silver teapot encircled by 7 matching teacups. Each had a small spoon handle protruding from it. He centered the tray on the table and distributed the cups. Tessa looked down at hers and saw a fine white powder beneath the tip of the spoon. She glanced at Manny's and saw his contained a similar substance, although it had a slightly darker hue like raw cane sugar. Their eyes met, and Manny braved the question. What is this stuff? Huh? Ted glanced up from placing Gerald's cup in front of him. Oh, you said sugar, right? They said whatever you would recommend, corrected Sandra. Right, Ted smiled. It's sugar, just the right amount to sweeten. My apologies, Tessa, I only had 1 packet of cane sugar on hand. Hope granulated is okay. Ted poured tea into his own cup and passed the teapot to Tessa, who poured and passed it to Manny, who passed it to Sandra, and so on until it reached Gerald, who passed it to Ted to return it to the center. While the teapot went around, Tessa and Manny stirred their sugar until it dissolved in the steaming golden tea. Tessa looked up to see if others were also stirring their cups. She caught Rich looking away from her before picking up his spoon and swirling it aimlessly in his cup. But Gerald was also stirring his, and the effort it took him to reach it over his gut didn't seem worth it if he was faking. Ted held a hand out to Manny and Tessa and said, We'll all drink together. Then he turned and opened a cabinet originally intended for a mini fridge. Ted's cabinet instead held a twisting wooden sculpture of smooth, tentacular limbs spreading apart in the lower half and coming back together to wind around each other near the top. In the center, a small glass dish rested in a carved hole in the sculpture's base. Rich stood and shifted the teapot to the side. Everyone but Manny and Tessa gave the sculpture a short bow, more like a nod of acknowledgement, as Ted placed it in the center of the table. Then he picked up the teapot and poured what remained inside it into the glass dish in the sculpture. The last drop fell at the very top of the dish. "Now we all drink," said Ted. He raised his teacup and everyone else copied him, even Manny and Tessa. Tessa made eye contact with Manny. He felt her grounding him outside the bizarre situation they'd entered into. Together, as everyone else also tipped their cups against their lips, they drank their tea. Tessa winced, but Manny didn't think it tasted too bad. It had a distinct bitter taste like ashwagandha, herby and natural. He pursed his lips sympathetically, though. "I suppose it's not the tastiest after all, is it?" asked Ted, grinning at them. They realized everyone was grinning at them. "No, not really," Manny said through a forced smile of his own. "It's not supposed to be, right?" asked Tessa. "No," chortled Ted. "It's just a necessary step. You'll see shortly. Gerald, want to kick us off?" Gerald grumbled his consent and floundered near the floor next to his seat. Erica jerked toward him and they heard her socked foot connect with something crinkly. Gerald's hand reappeared, pinched around a package of double-stuffed mint Oreos. He placed it in front of him, behind his empty cup. Then he pushed the package toward the center, toward the sculpture, until he could only reach it with the tips of his fingernails. He tilted his hands back and held them, pointed stiffly upward, an inch from his offering. Erica went next. She pushed a bottle of Tito's vodka toward the sculpture. She also pointed her hands up and kept her arms stretched over the table. Before Manny scanned over to Rich, he noticed the tea level in the sculpture's dish had lowered significantly. He told himself someone, likely Gerald, had bumped the table and sloshed some of the tea out of the brimming dish. But he watched carefully as Rich pushed his offering, or whatever it was meant to be, toward the sculpture. When Rich lifted his hands, they saw he'd presented a small box of condoms. Before Manny's eyes, the tea in the dish lowered. His head swirled and, strangely at the same time, his stomach churned. He hadn't noticed a hole in the table through which the tea could leak. He wondered if there was some kind of draining mechanism or hidden device within the wooden tentacles. Again, his stomach churned, spinning his vision too. Something felt wrong. He heard Tessa release a shaky, fearful breath. Sandra drew a purse into her lap and reached inside. She pulled out a circular hand mirror with a wooden frame and pushed it toward the sculpture. When she took up the same pose as the others, the tea lowered again. Ted reached behind his back, underneath his shirt, and drew out a long, gleaming knife. "I'm sorry, but we should go," Tessa said, suddenly standing. Ted looked not at her, but at Manny, and said, "The bathroom is through the other door in the foyer." Manny's stomach felt like it had been replaced by a smoothie blender. He jolted out of his seat and ran to the door. Ignoring Tessa entirely, Ted set his blade on the table, sat, and pushed it toward the sculpture. Tessa watched the last drop of tea absorb into the glass dish. She slumped into her chair. Nothing seemed real. She suddenly felt like she'd been in a dream the whole time. Her head and limbs felt too heavy, as they often do just before you wake up from a nightmare. But she wasn't waking up. She was falling asleep. She realized it just before her head hit the table, just in time to prevent the impact. She slid one of her heavy hands across the table, knocking her empty teacup off the side. She brought the hand under her head and rested her head on it. She muttered, "What's happening to me?" If she received an answer, she didn't hear it. Manny found the bathroom through yet another pocket door on the other side of the foyer, just in time. His tea erupted back through his mouth and into the toilet. He tried to keep it quiet, but the power forcing the tea out of him pushed so much air past his vocal cords he could not stop them from vibrating. His fear and embarrassment competed for prominence. He wondered if the strange tea had caused him to hallucinate the lowering liquid in the dish. Now that he'd gotten it out, the world felt more stable. The rules of reality had set back in. To be safe, he knelt in front of the toilet for a minute after he finished heaving to catch his breath and ensure there wouldn't be another round coming. A muted but sharp clank sounded next to his right knee. He noticed a floor vent and figured the sound had been made by the ducts settling. Then he heard the clinking of thick chains through the vent. When he listened more intently, he also made out soft scuffing sounds of movement. He thought it must be Donner chained up in the basement. The chains rattled again, this time clinking sharply at the end. Manny could picture them snapping taut as Donner jerked forward trying to escape. But could it really be Donner? The rattles and clanks sounded deeper than a typical dog chain. Heavier. And it sounded like there was more than one. He flushed the toilet once more for good measure, rinsed his mouth in the sink, and checked his hair before opening the door. Ted almost made him jump. He was standing only a couple of feet away, stiff and straight, without any expression on his face. "Sorry," Manny said, perhaps subconsciously influenced by Tessa. "What about?" Ted asked flatly. The tea just didn't sit well, I guess. I haven't eaten for a while, so maybe it does what it's meant to," said Ted. He remained still, blocking Manny's path. Remembering how Ted had invited questions, Manny said, "There's some loud rattling in the basement. Is that Donner?" Asked Ted, turning a listening ear toward the bathroom. On cue, the chains clanked against each other again. Ted closed his eyes and smiled, almost a grimace. "Yes, that's Donner. I should go check on him. Would you come with me?" Manny said, "Oh, that's okay. I should get back to Tessa. She and the others paused the ceremony so I could check on you. They might get confused and break their concentration if you return without me." "Well, I can tell them, just come with me, Manny. It will only take a few seconds. I can't let you disrupt things more than you already have." "Oh," said Manny. "It's this way." Ted led him away from the bathroom. They traveled to the end of the hallway where Ted opened a hardwood door. A sweaty odor wafted up the dark stairs behind the door. The stairs were attached to stone walls on either side for the first 2 steps, then the left wall opened to a void. Ted paused on the second of those 2 steps, raised a finger and said, "I just remembered the bulb is out. Stay here, I'll get a flashlight." Before Manny could protest, Ted left him alone at the jaws of the staircase. He gazed into its throat at the saliva cord hanging from the uvula light bulb at the base. It wasn't far. He could go down and test it, find out if Ted was lying so he could control the most limited resource in the basement, light. It wasn't a chasm of distance he needed to overcome, but fear. He dreaded taking a single step into that black basement echoing with clanking heavy chains and the low, breathy grunts of a large animal he could not say for certain was a dog. The longer Ted stayed away, the closer the dangling cord seemed to be. It offered itself to Manny as salvation against the oppressive darkness looming below. Manny reached for it. The stairs began to close down on him. "Whoa there!" Thick arms wrapped around Manny's middle, and suddenly the stairs opened to release him. He fell back on something soft but firm. It pushed him off. It was Ted. Recovering fast, Ted said, "You just about somersaulted down the stairs. You all right?" "I still feel a little woozy, I guess," said Manny. "You sure it was just the tea? Everyone else is fine. We all drank from the same pot," said Ted. "Maybe just my system," Manny offered. He felt more comfortable showing embarrassment than his distrust for Ted and his friends. "Couldn't find a flashlight without being too disruptive, so..." Ted held up a scented candle. "Oats and honey," he said. He produced a matchbook from his back pocket and lit the half-burned candle with smoke residue along its rim. He handed it to Manny and said, "You first." "Oh," Manny took the candle. "What if I fall again?" "Rather not have you falling on top of me. I'll catch you," said Ted. Manny nodded, pretending to agree with the logic. At least he had the fire. At least he had control of the light. With Ted behind him, Manny felt pressure to descend more quickly than he wanted to. He held the candle toward the open void and saw rows of shelves, thin metal shelves like they use in school libraries, lining the otherwise open basement. The shelves prevented the small candlelight from spreading any further. They contained dozens of jars full of liquids, grains, and herbs. Books and cardboard boxes protruded from the deeper shelves. The chains stopped clanking together as soon as Manny reached the bottom of the stairs. Manny pictured poor Donner chained up in the dark and wondered why Ted didn't kennel him upstairs. It seemed cruel to chain him down in the cool, sour-smelling basement. He decided not to ask about it. The question felt out of bounds even for Ted's performative openness. "Which way?" Manny asked. There was enough space to go around the shelves either left or right. He hoped Ted would not make him walk between them. The rows looked wide enough, but only barely, and Manny already felt trapped. He suddenly found it impossible to believe he had let himself be herded down into the basement of a man who was barely more than a stranger and beyond any definition of the word strange. "Sorry it's a little cramped down here," said Ted. "Go right. Donner's on the other side of these shelves." "That's a lot of shelves," Manny said, adding a friendly chuckle to the end. "Yes, I suppose so," chuckled Ted. "I lucked out. When they renovated the elementary school, they just gave these away. I took as many as I could fit down here." The candlelight flashed against jars of various powders. Manny noticed 2 circles in the dust where a couple of jars were missing. He slowed down to read some of the labels on the jars that were left, but they'd been written in tiny cursive he couldn't read without stopping. Ted drove him forward. They'd nearly reached the end of the final row of shelves when Ted suddenly stopped and said, "Hold on, Manny. Could I borrow that?" He held out his hand for the candle. Manny froze, holding the candle away from Ted. He searched for an excuse to keep it and avoid giving up his last shred of autonomy, but all the compassion Ted previously expressed for his and Tessa's caution had run out. Manny looked into his stony eyes and saw no give. His stony hand waited, resolute and impatient. Manny handed the warm candle to Ted. Ted's hand closed around it, but not enough. It slipped through his fingers. The light went out before the glass tinkled across the floor. Manny felt 2 shards hit his socks, as well as a single drop of warm wax that stuck to the hair on his left shin. The burst of oats and honey aroma mingled with the basement's armpit odor to make Manny's head spin again. Or at least, he thought it was just his head. In the abrupt and total darkness, he couldn't be sure the entire room wasn't spinning around him. "Careful of the glass," Ted warned. Manny thought he sounded further away. The chains rattled aggressively. Manny guessed the sound or the darkness had agitated Donner. "Is there another light down here?" he asked. He instinctively reached for his phone, forgetting it was sitting in a basket by the front door. Ted said, No, but if you follow the shelves back, you'll find the stairs. His voice was absolutely further away. A low, breathy growling that sounded nothing like a dog joined the clanking chains. What is that? Manny asked, not bothering to hide his fear. Just Donner. He's chained up, don't worry. Just move toward the stairs. But I'm not wearing shoes. Ted didn't say anything. The sourness overpowered the candle's sweetness and made Manny not want to breathe. Ted? He called. From the stairs now, Ted called back. Just stay there. I'll bring another light. Light appeared at the top of the stairs, casting Ted's shadow against the wall at the bottom. Manny looked over the shelves in time to see one of Ted's feet vanish. No, wait! The door closed, and the darkness became complete again. For a moment, the chains went silent, and the only sounds were the grunting breaths of the reeking creature around the corner, and the scuffling thumps of many footsteps directly above him. It sounded like the group had animated as soon as Ted returned. Manny considered shouting for Tessa, but a flash of fear for her held him back. Shouting her name probably would have provoked the hidden creature anyway. Its chains began to scrape on the floor, and it started to sniff the air. Or is it crying? Manny couldn't tell. He slid his left foot across the floor and inevitably kicked 2 glass shards against each other. The sniffling ceased, and the chains clinked to a halt. Slower now, Manny slid his left foot the rest of the way, then dragged his right foot into the clear path behind it. He repeated this motion. This time, his heel slid on soft wax, and he jerked his right foot forward to catch himself. He felt glass crunch under his sock as a searing pain shot into his heel. The chains stiffened, and the sound of flat, slapping feet echoed off the cinder block and concrete. An unnervingly human groan came next, followed by a desperate, muted howling. He's muzzled too, the poor dog. Instead of thinking about them, he took advantage of the noises to pick up his pace, dragging his right foot behind his left on its toes. After 2 more repetitions, he guessed he had exceeded the candle's blast radius. He reached for a shelf, careful not to knock anything over as he traced it with his fingers, following it to the small empty space before the stairs. Manny had hoped his eyes would have adjusted, but there was no light in the basement whatsoever. If there were any windows, Ted had blacked them out. Or buried them, thought Manny. He didn't know why that felt so much worse. Letting go of the shelf took more courage than he expected, but after 2 long steps through the void, his knee collided with the side of the staircase. The creature knew he was almost out. It started jerking at the chains and growling. Not at him, it seemed, but at the noisy chains holding it back. Manny finally found the bottom of the stairs and climbed onto them. He crawled up on all 4s. After a few steps, he lost his balance and twisted, slamming his punctured heel into the edge of a step. A shout escaped his gut as pain twisted up his leg. The shard was still in his heel. He ran his hand down his leg until he found his foot, then, painstakingly slowly, he felt for the wound. His middle finger accidentally flicked the protruding end of the shard, and his foot nearly jerked away. A stony crackle on the far side of the basement caused the creature to make a giddy, unsettlingly human sound. Manny plucked the glass from his heel and felt warm blood in his sock. He took the last few steps more slowly. When he reached the door, he couldn't find the doorknob. He started to worry there might not be one on that side of the door. When he finally did find it, he worried it might be locked. But all of his fear was for naught. Just like Ted keeps telling you, he thought. The knob twisted in his hand, the door opened, and Manny was able to flee the darkness, the stench, and the threatening sounds of the basement. Stay tuned for part 2. Manny ran until he found the foyer. He snuck across it, keeping his wounded heel raised, and scanned for the edge of the other pocket door. Someone who didn't know it was there could have easily missed it. He finally gave up and pressed his hands into the wood. He pushed sideways and felt the wall move. A small gap opened. He went to it and peeked through. Ted and his friends were all standing around the oval table now. They held their arms stiffly toward the center, like when they'd presented their offerings, and all their heads were bowed. Tessa was lying down in the middle of the table. Sandra's mirror rested on her forehead, just above her closed eyes. Erica's bottle of vodka lay across Tessa's diaphragm, resting against her breasts. Gerald's cookie rose and fell on her navel, and Rich's box of condoms lay on its back across her thighs. Ted's knife pointed to the soft skin under her jaw. Its handle lilted on her sternum. It was impossible to tell if she was conscious enough to know what would happen if she took too deep a breath. Tessa's precarious position is not what made Manny freeze at the door, though the sight of her did enrage him. What petrified him was the tentacular sculpture hovering 2 feet above her. He didn't see any rope or thread securing it to the ceiling, nor was there anything above that it could have been attached to. And he felt it trying to pull something from his belly. He gently closed the door and backed up, but the tugging in his guts persisted. Albeit disturbing, it wasn't painful. It felt like a continuous, breathless burp. His head started spinning. He thought he might be sick again. He unlocked the front door and felt a wash of relief when it opened for him. The sky outside glowed a vivid orange with brushstrokes of pink clouds layered on the horizon, darkening to purple before disappearing behind the houses across the street. Manny stumbled to the edge of the porch and caught himself on a post. There, he caught his breath and stabilized his balance. The nausea passed. So did the airy tugging. He looked down at his right sock. Blood stained the entire gray bottom and part of the white above it. It wasn't saturated, though, and looked like it might already be drying. He hoped that meant he would not need stitches. He definitely wouldn't be sprinting home like he wanted to, though. You can't leave her, he thought. Had he run, he couldn't have called the police anyway. He left his phone behind in his rush to escape. He turned back to the front door and hobbled toward it, expecting the tugging and vertigo to return. Neither came. Maybe he just needed some fresh air. Ted came through the pocket door just after Manny entered the house again. "Going so soon?" he asked. "No, I need to take Tessa with me," Manny replied, treading the line between defiance and aggression. "Hey, where's this hostility coming from? Oh, shoot. I see you stepped on the glass." "Yeah, after you locked me down in your basement," Manny snarled. "Locked you in?" Ted asked, matching Manny's rising volume. "I didn't lock anything. I told you I needed to get another light." By now, Rich, Erica, and Sandra had filled in the wide doorway. Gerald watched from his chair. "Where's Tessa?" Manny demanded, trying to peek past them. "Manny, I'm right here," said Tessa. Rich shifted aside. Tessa gave Manny an awkward wave and a pursed lip smile. "Are you okay?" Manny asked. The cold sweat droplets under his hair turned hot. "Yeah, I'm good. What are you—" Manny looked at Ted again. "Who's chained up in your basement?" Sandra gasped, but tried to disguise it as a cough when Ted shot her a nasty look. He turned back to Manny without changing his expression. "Donner." "That wasn't Donner," said Manny. Well, who do you think it was? Ted challenged. Rich piped in. It's Donner, buddy. I'm the one who put him down there before the ceremony. Manny met his steely eyes. You chained him in a dark, cold basement? Rich shrugged. Ted said, He likes it down there. He usually falls asleep. I wanted to see if he was reacting to your energy again. Manny said, Why didn't you... Ted didn't let him finish. Why don't you just go, Manny? I'm sorry about the candle. It was an accident. I was going to come back and help you out of there before you hurt yourself, but these people went ahead and started the ceremony without me. And they were right to. We were running out of time and I had to jump in. It wouldn't have been much longer. Thanks, everybody, Tessa said as she forced her way between Rich and Erica. She remembered their shoes and handed Manny's to him. Manny took them but didn't put them on. He grabbed both of their phones from the basket and went out the door without another word. Even if Ted was being honest, the whole situation had permanently soured Manny toward him and his friends. Unfortunately, it seemed Tessa had enjoyed a completely opposite experience. She shared friendly goodbyes with everyone before coming to join him. As she stepped onto the porch, Ted extended his hand, holding a black backpack. Don't forget this, he told Tessa. Manny didn't remember her coming with a backpack, but she graciously thanked him and put it on. Ted gave Manny a curt nod, then shut the door. Seriously, are you okay? Tessa asked. They started walking toward the sidewalk. Manny told her every detail of what happened after he'd run out of the ceremony. He finished as they reached his driveway. So, no, I guess I'm not okay. I can't believe you are. How'd they get that thing to hover over you like that? And who the hell convinced you to lay on the table? It just felt okay, I guess? I guess it felt right? I don't know. They didn't force me to, if that's what you're worried about. Well, good, said Manny. He asked, What's with the backpack? Tessa said, It's mine? You weren't wearing it when we went there. Yes I was, she retorted. The last trace of her smile vanished, and she looked straight ahead. Manny made a show of clearing his head and said, Not to steal your line, but I'm sorry. I just had the weirdest and honestly scariest experience of my life, and I think my brain's like traumatized or something. Can I walk you to your door? Tessa said, Sure. You want a snack? I'm starving. Yeah, that sounds good. They didn't speak again until Tessa unlocked her front door and said, Come on in. Immediately upon entering, she spun in a full circle, taking in the ceiling and walls all around. Whoa, I can't believe it actually worked. What, the ritual thing? Asked Manny. Get in here, said Tessa. It feels amazing now. Oh yeah? Manny stepped inside. Tessa had furnished the house with many plants and the light furniture Manny had helped her and her brother move in. In lieu of paintings or photos, her walls were scattered with small shelves containing various succulents. Air plants hung in every corner. She'd clearly made an effort to make the place her own as quickly as possible. Manny said, Speaking of the ceremony, no, don't talk about it anymore, Tessa begged. To his surprise, she spun around, threw her arms around his neck and whined, It worked, just leave it alone. But I want to know, Manny, how did they get that thing to float over you? What thing? She asked, retracting her arms. He followed her into the kitchen. The sculpture thing. I saw it hovering over you, but it didn't look like it was attached to anything. Didn't notice, she said, shrugging. The backpack slipped partway off her shoulders. She slipped it the rest of the way off onto the counter and unzipped it. Ooh, she cheered. She pulled out Erica's bottle of vodka. I don't have any mixers, so shots? Manny hesitated. Tessa said, I'm not talking about Ted's anymore unless you take a shot. You gotta loosen up. Manny rolled his eyes. Fine. Oh, wait, what about your foot? You need a Band-Aid or something? If you have one in your magic pack there. Tessa screwed the cap off the vodka and took a swig. A long swig. She set it down and slid it toward Manny, then reached into the backpack. Let me see. Nope, but I do have... She pulled out Rich's box of condoms and did a subtle dance as she set them on the counter. Ooh. She reached in once more, and this time retrieved a single Oreo. Manny, who had just raised the bottle to his own lips, lowered it and said, "Do not eat that." Stop me, dared Tessa. Manny swiped at the cookie, but she shoved the whole thing into her mouth. Chewing, she pointed to the bottle and said, "Blink." So what, they let you keep all that stuff as souvenirs? He asked, stepping toward the backpack. Tessa blocked him. He asked, "What about that big knife? Did Ted shove that thing in there?" Still chewing, Tessa raised a finger and reached into the bag with her other hand, then nodded. She pulled out the long, shiny knife and also pinched between two fingers Sandra's hand mirror. Ted didn't know what to say, so he drank. Oh, right, a Band-Aid. Tessa took the bottle from him as she passed by, leaving the kitchen. She went into the bathroom and flipped on the light. Manny watched her take another long pull before setting the bottle down and opening a cupboard. It does feel better in here, he said, trying to be encouraging. His gaze unconsciously found the condoms. He quickly glanced away. Doesn't it? Tessa asked. She flipped off the light, picking up the bottle, and returned with a large Band-Aid already unwrapped. She drunkenly shoved the bottle into his hand and, in a drunken British accent, said, "For the pain, sir." She knelt on one knee in front of him and grabbed his foot. He yanked it back, but she grabbed it again and looked up at him. Just let me do it. Don't make it weird. He took a small sip as he watched her pull off his sock. It stuck to the wound. He felt it peel away, wet and sticky. Tessa seemed unfazed. She pointed to the bottle, then opened her hand. Maybe you should eat something before you have any more, suggested Manny. It's not for me, dummy. She reached and grabbed the bottle herself. Manny said, "Wait, don't," but she'd already begun to pour vodka on his foot. It stung in the wound. He winced, jerking his foot away again. Tessa caught it and used her shirt to wipe it dry. Well, that's not sanitary, Manny laughed, half joking. You calling me dirty? She asked, flicking her eyes up at him. His breath caught. With a new tenderness, she tilted his foot upward and placed the bandage over his wound. Then she gently set his toes on the floor. He tested his heel. It hurt at first, but the pain subsided quickly, allowing him to press it all the way down. How is it? Tessa asked. Better, said Manny. She handed the bottle up to him. He took it, then reached down to help her up. She didn't respond, just kept staring up at him. Then she lowered her other knee. Hey, Manny said. I think you're drunk. I wasn't drunk the other night, she whispered. Manny said, We didn't. Tessa grabbed the back of his knee. But I wanted to. Feeling a little drunk himself, Manny almost gave in. Tessa's hand started sliding up the back of his leg, and with the other, she brushed hair out of her face. But when he looked into her eyes, he saw inebriated vacancy behind them. No matter how much he wanted to, he knew he would regret letting her continue. He grabbed her shoulders firmly enough to push her back. She jerked to her feet and stared at him with something like hatred. Then she snatched the hand mirror off the counter and held it in front of her face. Oh, she said. I'm not pretty enough. No, that's not it at all, Manny shouted after her as she ran to her bedroom and slammed the door shut. He took a step in that direction, but his injury and the vodka made him stumble. He steadied himself, then walked to her door. "Tessa, I'm sorry," he spoke through the door. "I think you're beautiful. When I first saw you..." The door opened. Tessa pushed him out of the way and went back to the kitchen. He let her go, giving her space. She opened a cupboard and grabbed a bag of Sun Chips and a box of Frosted Flakes and put them on the counter. She put the cap on the vodka, then shoved the bottle and snacks into the backpack and zipped it. She slung it over one shoulder before marching back toward Manny. He stepped aside so she wouldn't have to push him again. After walking back into her bedroom, she said, "Bye," and shut the door again. Manny sighed, "Bye," and hobbled toward the front door. He picked up his shoes and left, making his way back home confused, concerned, and just as depressed as before. The promised effect of Ted's ceremony had not worked on him. Manny wasn't able to sleep. He kept thinking about everything that had happened at Ted's. So much strangeness had packed itself into such a short amount of time. He examined every word he could remember, hunting for clues that might help him make sense of it all. He considered whether he had anything worth taking to the police. He had a strong feeling Ted had done something to their tea, something to make him sick and make Tessa compliant. She'd been different when he got back upstairs, and even more so after he took her home. They'd definitely been flirting before, but the way she behaved after Ted's felt so rushed, desperate, and forced. It made him uncomfortable to imagine what she was doing now on the other side of their shared walls. The man or beast chained up in Ted's basement was the only part he thought the police would show any interest in. The more time passed, though, the more he believed it could have actually been Donner. He couldn't trust his memory anymore as it reshaped and reformed around the different ideas that popped into his head. In the end, Ted had let them leave as soon as they'd wanted to. He hadn't hurt either of them, at least directly or that Manny could prove. His heel was his own fault, technically, and he knew if he tried going to the police, Ted could easily and reasonably call it an accident. As for what happened to Tessa, he couldn't prove they'd done anything at all. She'd been conscious enough to walk home, to speak coherently. The cops wouldn't care about some subtle change in her behavior, especially since she'd immediately inebriated herself when she got home. Had she been acting strangely before that? Manny honestly couldn't remember. Around 11, Manny dozed off on the couch. He'd left Netflix on, and after he didn't respond to the "Are you still watching" prompt, his TV's screensaver started rolling photos of mountainscapes across the screen. The shadows in the room shifted, shrank, and grew as the scenes panned across his screen. A sound woke him from his shallow sleep. He thought it was the TV at first, but then he noticed it had started counting down to go to sleep. He heard it again, a sound like someone crinkling a bag of chips, and it sounded like it was coming from the kitchen. Although he had no idea how she would have gotten in, he pictured Tessa hunched behind the kitchen island over a bag of Lay's from his pantry. He rose from the couch. "Tessa?" The sound came again. It wasn't a crinkling bag. He could hear that now as his sleepiness wore off. It sounded more solid, more metallic. He looked toward the front door, just as his TV turned itself off. There was a silhouette being traced by the street lamp outside on the other side of his door's frosted glass. It looked tall, particularly its head, which appeared stretched and conical. He could see the spidery shadows of long hair floating behind it in the night breeze. Otherwise, the person on the other side of his door was completely still. Manny held his breath, hoping the person outside didn't know he was there. They knocked lightly next to the window while holding something long and round that left oily smears on the frosted glass. After almost 2 minutes standing still and waiting, the person turned and walked off the porch toward Manny's right. With a jolt, he realized they were going to the kitchen window. He dove behind the island. It was the only place out of view. He wished he could still see the window somehow. He had no idea how long the persistent stranger would wait. It was time to call the cops. Manny didn't know how, but he knew this had something to do with Ted and his ceremony, not that it mattered. He'd heard this person trying the doorknob. They had attempted to enter his home, and that was all he needed to tell the police. He reached into his pocket. His phone wasn't there. He'd left it on the coffee table. He could see its reflective screen merely 3 feet away, but well within view of the window. Reflections, he realized. He glanced around at his walls. He'd barely begun decorating, but he had a few framed movie posters around the living room. A Clockwork Orange, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and Psycho. On Psycho, he could see the top portion of the kitchen window reflected on the protective plexiglass. He rose slowly to ensure he remained hidden while lowering his perspective of the window. What came into view first stopped him halfway up. It was the top of the person's conical head. Only it wasn't part of their head. It was a crown. The sculpture from Ted's mini-fridge cabinet. He still couldn't see who was wearing it, but a few possibilities came to mind. Ted, his friends, whoever was in the basement. He dove for his phone.
Manny?
He heard Tessa's voice, muffled by glass and something thicker. Manny twisted around, still halfway bent over. Tessa? She was standing outside his kitchen window, wearing the sculpture like a crown and eating a frozen loaf of garlic bread. She had covered her face in drunkenly applied makeup. He wasn't certain, but he thought she'd even put on eyelash extensions. "What are you doing?" he demanded, rising. He walked around the island to stand in front of the window. He saw Tessa had changed out of the t-shirt she was wearing before and put on a tastefully revealing green dress.
Why didn't you answer the door?
She asked, slurring concerningly. She'd clearly not stopped drinking since he left hours before. I was asleep, and it's after 11. Where'd you get that thing? He pointed to the sculpture.
This? Ted put it in the backpack he gave me. Isn't that crazy? It seemed really important to him. I can't believe he gave it to me.
She slumped a few inches to the left before catching herself. Her eyes startled open, and she laughed. You're really drunk, said Manny.
So open the door and take care of me,
she whined. Manny knew it wasn't a good idea, but he could not in good conscience send her off in her present state. He poured a glass of water and raised it to the window. You need this, he said.
I do. Oh, that looks so good. Can I please come in?
Come on, Manny said, jerking his head toward the door. He went to it, unlatched the deadbolt, and turned the doorknob. He pulled open the door and immediately saw what Tessa held in her other hand. Ted's gleaming knife. Manny uttered a noise resembling the word "no" and tried to slam the door shut. Tessa lurched forward, pressing herself against it and pushing her gleeful smile into the crack. She smeared burgundy lipstick on the doorframe. She pushed the knife through the opening and jabbed it at Manny's thigh, forcing him back. She forced him to the wall with the knife as she squeezed through. She dropped her garlic bread and advanced toward him. Tessa, this isn't you, Manny shouted.
Why, 'cause I'm drunk? Asked Tessa. You think I'm helpless and don't know what I'm doing? Is that what you think?
It's that thing on your head, Manny said. I think it's controlling you or something.
Manny, she said flatly. I really just want to kill you.
She raised the knife and slashed downward. Manny tried to grab her arm and missed. Fortunately, so did she. But now her knife was down at her side, pointed at him, and he was leaning over it. With barely a pause between the two motions, Tessa stabbed at him. This time he did catch her arm in both hands, but not before the knife cut through his shirt and nicked the bottom of his ribs. He felt the cold sting of the blade and could imagine it cutting the rest of the way through, opening him effortlessly. He said, "I'm sorry," and kneed her in the stomach. She doubled over, jerking him down with her. He had to let go of her arm. He slapped at the sculpture, but it stayed on her head. The impact knocked her to one side, but she maintained a firm grip on the knife. Manny escaped through the door, slamming it shut behind himself. Gripping the knob, he shouted through the closed door, "I'm going to get help. Just stay here. Please stay here, Tessa." She growled at him and tried twisting the knob. He held it fast, scanning the street for where to go next. His phone was still sitting on the coffee table. It was the middle of the night, and all the other houses were dark. He didn't know anyone else on the street yet and doubted anyone would open their door so late, let alone allow him inside. He could only think of one place to go. One place he could reasonably reach before Tessa caught up to him. And that was Ted's house. Maybe, he thought, he could force Ted to fix her. "Stay here," Manny repeated. Then he let go of the door and ran. He sprinted up the sidewalk. He heard his front door open behind him, then slam shut. He heard the warm, almost wet padding of bare feet on cement. But he didn't look back. He tilted forward and ran even harder, ignoring the pain in his own bare foot. Manny had never been very strong, but he'd always been fast, the fastest person he knew. He outpaced Tessa by 3 houses. He ripped open Ted's storm door and started knocking and simultaneously ringing his doorbell. He looked over his shoulder at Tessa drunkenly sprinting toward him. Every few steps she needed to reset her balance, which bought him valuable seconds. A light came on inside, but Manny didn't stop knocking and ringing. He yelled, "Ted, open up. You gotta let me in now." Hold on, Ted grumbled inside. Tessa reached his driveway. "Open it now, right now," Manny screamed. The second Manny heard the latch click, he turned the knob himself and forced his way inside. "Hey," Ted shouted, but Manny ignored him. He pushed him back and slammed the door shut, locking it again himself. "What are you doing here?" He recognized the voice, but not the pale, flat face he saw when he spun around. Had she not spoken, he wouldn't have recognized Sandra. Her makeup was gone now, along with her hair, including her eyebrows. She looked like a 60-year-old baby, staring at him with wide blue eyes. Any natural beauty she'd once possessed had been destroyed by her own rampant vanity. Ted sputtered. "This is completely I don't care," Manny interrupted, turning to him but keeping Sandra in view. He jabbed a finger toward Ted. "This is your fault and you need to fix it. Now, Ted, you have to fix it right now." "That's not how it works," Ted growled at him. He glanced at Sandra. "You should go, dear. I'll be fine." Sandra nodded and eagerly grabbed the doorknob. Tessa knocked, startling her backward. Ted said, "Go out the back." Sandra nodded. She opened the pocket door leading to the hallway. As soon as it was open, Ted shouted, "Get him, boy!" and in charged Donner. Manny tried to put Ted between himself and the dog, but Ted stepped out of the way. With one leap, Donner was upon him, snapping, growling, barking full-throatedly in his face. He knocked Manny against the pocket door that led to the room with the oval table. Manny pressed both hands into the dog's chest to hold him back while suffering dozens of scratches along his arms from Donner's scrambling paws. Ted gave Sandra a kiss before she slipped away. With a massive shove, Manny finally pushed Donner off him. The dog twisted to the side to catch himself. Manny used the 2 seconds this bought him to open the pocket door and slip through. He slammed it shut and held it, searching for a lock. There wasn't one. Donner started pawing at and slamming into the door, growling and barking the whole time. Manny heard Ted open the front door and say, "He's right through there," and heard Tessa answer, "Thank you." He heard a soft thud, a grunt, then a heavy thump. Ted groaned, "I thought," then made a long wheezing sound that started dry and ended very wet. There was a squelch and a gush of liquid as he choked out a howl of total despair. After another, wetter thump, he went silent. Manny pushed open the pocket door. He knew what he should expect to find, but it still shocked him to see Ted sprawled on the floor in a spreading pool of his own blood, which Donner had already begun to lap at. The knife's handle protruded from Ted's diaphragm at the top of a gurgling, vertical gash. "What did you do?" Manny asked. His mouth formed the words before his brain. Tessa looked up at him with blood speckled all over her face and in her hair. Somehow the sculpture still adorned her head, perfectly in place. Sweat and tears had made her makeup run. Her hands were stiff, trembling claws, and he could see her chest sucking in and out rapidly. "Tessa?" she whimpered. I don't know why I did that." Then she screamed, "Why did I do that, Manny?" A footstep creaked in the hallway. Manny rushed forward and grabbed Tessa by the shoulders to move her away from the door. Sandra peeked around the corner, pale and trembling. "Ted?" she asked. "Ted, darling? Oh, Ted!" She moaned and collapsed into the room. She fell on all fours at Ted's side and gazed longingly into his open eyes. Manny tapped Tessa on the shoulder and nodded subtly toward the door. She nodded back, then broke free of him and lunged for the door. "Stop!" Sandra screamed. She yanked the knife from Ted's belly and jumped at them. Manny pushed her in midair, knocking her into a wall, but she maintained her grip on the knife and lunged again. She slashed at Tessa, nicking her exposed back as Tessa turned to run into the hallway. Donner barked anxiously and backed away. His vicious side, like Tessa's, seemed to have died with Ted. This allowed Manny to run after Tessa and, hopefully, toward the back door. He hadn't seen it yet, but he'd heard Ted mention it to Sandra. Sandra sprinted behind them, gaining quickly. Her face looked like a vacant skull. Tessa screamed. Manny shouted for help as they sprinted toward the only open door, the last one down the hall. The basement door. He reached it first and ushered Tessa into the dark stairwell. He followed right behind her, pulling the door behind himself. He felt Sandra tug at the other knob as he yanked it shut. Tessa shouted, "Leave us alone!" and pounded on the door. Sandra screamed incoherently on the other side. "There's no way out down here," a dry voice wheezed below them. Manny nearly lost his grip on the doorknob. Tessa stopped pounding and twisted around. "Who's there?" asked Manny. "Andrew," the raspy voice replied. "Where are you?" asked Tessa. Andrew said, "He lied to you about the light. It works." "Go turn it on," Manny whispered to Tessa. She hissed, "I'm not going down there." Sandra tried to stab through the door. They heard the knife scrape across the wood as it glanced off. "Can you hold the door?" Manny asked. Tessa nodded and wrapped her hands over his, smearing them with blood as she pulled them away. "I don't want to hurt you," said Andrew. "Are you the Andrew who disappeared?" asked Manny, feeling for the drawstring. "Obviously," Andrew replied. He coughed. It sounded both weak and brutal. "Ted brought you down for me to kill you earlier," he said. "You know that, right? Good thing I hadn't slipped my cuffs yet." "He told me you were his dog," said Manny. He finally found the drawstring and pulled it. The supposedly dead bulb glowed, filling the basement with equal parts amber light and charcoal shadows. One of the shadows moved. and Manny realized it was an emaciated gray man sitting on the floor. His pose suggested he had dragged himself to his current position. In one hand, he had also dragged a chain with a cuff at one end and a plate with 4 protruding bolts on the other. He coughed again. "Manny, she's getting through," Tessa cried. Manny rushed back up the stairs to help her. "Here." He slipped his hands back around the doorknob and clamped down once hers were free. Sandra, likely feeling the renewed strength behind the door, momentarily gave up. She shouted,
"You have nowhere to go. I can wait you out."
"She's right," Andrew said. "Ted sealed the basement off from the outside." "What do we do?" Tessa asked. "He's dead, isn't he?" Andrew asked. "Ted?" asked Manny. "How did you know?" "Because I don't want to kill either of you," Andrew said. "Guessing she's the one he cursed this time?" He nodded toward Tessa, still wearing her crown. His question reminded her it was there. She tried to take it off, but it clung to her hair.
"Just come out already. You've got nowhere to go,"
Sandra jeered. "Hang on," Manny told Tessa. "Don't pull too hard. The sculpture has something like glue or something sticking to it." She brought her head closer to him to let him examine it. Since Sandra wasn't actively trying the door, he let go with one hand and lightly tugged at the crown. "Ow!" she winced. I think it's the tea," Manny said. "Maybe not, but there's something brown and sticky leaking out of it." "Gross," Ted groaned. "I think I can get it off, though." Tessa said, "Don't let go of the door." "Let me help," Andrew wheezed. "Please." "He's too weak to hurt you," Manny whispered. Tessa nodded and went down to Andrew. She knelt beside him and tilted the sculpture toward him. "It'll hurt," he warned her. "Just get it off," she said. He pressed a chalky palm into her forehead and pressed it back as he tugged the sculpture forward. She felt dozens of hairs torn from her scalp at once. Only a few remained stuck to the sculpture when Andrew completed the first tug, and he finished the job with a much smaller tug. He set it on the ground, then whipped his detached chain into the air and brought it down on the sculpture, instantly smashing it into pieces. He hit the largest piece once more for good measure, splintering it apart. "Oh, that felt good," he said. "They've kept me down here for weeks. The only craving they've satisfied is the alcohol, because it keeps me weak and makes me die quicker." "Why didn't they just kill you?" Tessa asked, helping him into a more comfortable position. He said, "Because I had Ted's desire to kill. As long as I lived, I carried it so he didn't have to. Don't you get it? You and I, they made us carriers. They put their worst traits onto us so they wouldn't have to carry them themselves." "They've been torturing you," Tessa whispered. "Better than torturing themselves, I guess," Andrew whispered back. Then he coughed again and said, "That's why they needed you. I'm not going to be around much longer." Manny suddenly grunted, "Guys," and they heard the door clap. Sandra shrieked like a lunatic. Manny said, "I could use some help." "Go," Andrew said. Tessa ran up the stairs and relieved Manny. He shook his hands out, then clamped them down over hers. "I'm sorry I got you into this," she said. "Sorry, what was that?" Manny growled as they resisted another pull from Sandra. "I said I'm sorry." He kissed her. It was only a peck, but he felt her return it in the brief moment that it lasted. "Let her open it," Andrew wheezed. "We need a plan first," said Manny. "I've got one, just let her open the door." Manny looked at Tessa. She gave an anxious shrug. Together, they let go. They had enough time to sneak all the way down the stairs before Sandra tried the door again. When she encountered no resistance, she threw it open. She held the knife out toward them and cackled, beginning her descent. "What do we do?" Tessa asked. When Andrew didn't answer, she glanced at him. He'd fallen face down on the floor, totally still.
Oh no, he died before he told us his plan.
Just let us go, Manny said to Sandra. We'll tell the police you were another victim, okay? We'll say he tricked you just like he tricked us.
And will you confess to murdering him?
Sandra demanded. She was halfway down now and quickening her pace. Tessa glanced at Manny. He intentionally kept his focus on Sandra. She laughed and said,
Can I tell you a secret? I don't want to kill you. As much as I loved him, I am not Ted. But I will do it if I have no other choice. So tell me, do I have another? She tripped over a piece of the broken sculpture and looked down to see what it was. When she recognized it and realized what they'd done, she froze, horrified. Do you have any idea what you've done to us? She asked, her voice high and whispery. Manny pointed at Tessa and seethed, I hope it's worse than what you did to her. We don't want to kill you either, said Tessa. So how about we all just... Andrew sprung up on all fours and swung his chain at Sandra's knees. He caught everyone off guard, especially Sandra, whose legs buckled at the impact. You! She raised the knife and fell upon Andrew. He was ready. He whipped her with the chain using most of his remaining strength. He caught her in front of the ear and blood sprayed across half of her face. Andrew dropped the chain and grabbed her around the neck, pulling her to the ground. He bit into her cheek, digging his teeth into the bone. She howled. Manny rushed to intervene. Andrew dislodged to yell, Run, you idiots! Then sunk his teeth back in. The unmutilated half of Sandra's face stretched in disbelief and shock. She raised the knife behind Andrew and stabbed it straight downward, lodging it in his back before Manny or Tessa could react. Andrew laughed and, still laughing, shouted, Run, run, run! His mouth closed around the front of Sandra's throat. There was a crunch, and she went silent. She kept a firm grip on the knife, though, twisting it in Andrew's back as he chewed through her. Tessa grabbed Manny's arm and pulled him back. She whispered, Let's go. There's nothing we can do. Neither could take their eyes off of the tangled bodies as they climbed the stairs. Sandra's body jerked and spasmed under Andrew's. He had gone still, with his jaws still clamped around her voice box. It was impossible to tell whose blood was whose. Let me check for Donner, Manny said at the top of the stairs. He tiptoed down the hall. When he peered into the foyer, he quickly looked away and covered his mouth. He beckoned Tessa to come, but intercepted her halfway down the hallway. It's safe, he said, but don't look. It's not pretty. Tessa nodded. He led her to the foyer. She closed her eyes and let him take her hand to lead her. She knew they'd entered the foyer when an odor like hot metal and wet mushrooms filled her mouth and nose. She could hear what Manny didn't want her to see. Donner's lapping tongue and nibbling teeth. She wondered what version of the curse Ted had put on Donner to control him like he had. The poor dog clearly did not harbor much love for him. Manny, hold on, she said, letting go of his hand. She opened her eyes. She turned away from Ted's body, but not before seeing his hazy eyes and graying face. Knowing she made him that way made the sight worse. With her back turned, she called Donner to her. She heard little splashes as he trotted toward her through the blood. His smile was sticky and red, and she tried not to breathe while he panted in her face. She felt behind his ears and down his neck while scanning the rest of him with her eyes. Her fingers found something near his collar. She pushed away his fur to examine it. Donner was wearing a normal dog collar, but also a necklace made of hollow bones strung together by a cord of white hair. Tessa grabbed the back of it and yanked on the front, snapping it. The tiny, hollow bones scattered. Donner tried to lick her face, but she pushed him back. You stay here, boy. We'll get you some help, okay? Someone's coming. She nodded to Manny and stood. He opened the front door,
and together they stepped into the cool, fresh night air. Donner tried to follow. When Manny pushed him back, he returned to Ted's corpse. Manny quickly shut the door. Okay, let's run through it one more time, Manny said, sitting on Tessa's couch with his phone in his hand. Tessa sat beside him in a bathrobe, her hair twisted up in a towel. Are you sure we shouldn't just tell the truth? She asked. And make them think we're the crazy ones? No, said Manny. Okay, so we say Ted and Sandra invited us over. We drank tea, that'll be important, injected Manny. Right. We had tea that we think was poisoned because we both started feeling sick and tired right after. Ted attacked you with the knife, and I jumped in to help you. During the struggle, the knife got turned around, and we're not sure exactly how, but it got jammed into his stomach. We were going to try to help him, but then Sandra grabbed the knife and forced us into the basement where we found Andrew chained up and dying. We helped him get free, but he attacked Sandra. We had no idea he was going to do that. So this is where we can start telling the truth, right? Tessa asked. It still sounds absolutely insane, but yeah, everything from that point on is the truth. I still don't think they'll believe us, Tessa said. Manny put an arm around her shoulders and drew her close. In his other hand, he held his phone, the numbers 911 displayed above the keypad and green call button. Wait, Tessa said. What about Rich and Erica and Gerald? What are we going to do about them? Tell the truth, said Manny. We'll say they were there and that they all knew who Ted had in his basement. Hopefully they'll be arrested for, I don't know, conspiracy or something. And if not, we'll worry about that if we have to, Tessa finished. She sighed. I'm not going to be awake enough to keep this story straight for long, Manny. Let's just get it over with. He cleared his throat and pressed call.